All right. Welcome back, everybody. The cowbell is already starting to lose some of its effectiveness. That concerns me because the cattle prod is the next thing we go to. So usually we get through the first day with just the bell, but maybe not this time. All right, our next session is the DCP, or the Drought Contingency Plan session, which would provide a new and aggressive schedule for conservation and shortage sharing in the lower basin. So this is a big topic, and we have a big panel. So we will struggle, I think, to stay on time. So that means I can't tell all the stories I want to tell, which is, I think you'll agree, is a tremendous shame, but it's what it is. We're going to start with Terry Fulp, who is the Director of Reclamation's Lower Colorado River Region. For all practical purposes, Terry is the water master. And I was wondering, is that the name of your boat, Water Master? It should be. Okay. I've known Terry a long time. He's promised to teach me barefoot water skiing the next time I show up, and I'm a little afraid of that, I'll have to admit. I'll shorten my introduction, but I will say I did Google Terry's name in the spirit of Googling everyone. And this is how you know Terry's a big deal. The first 4 pages of results are all the real Terry Fulp. You have to be 4 pages deep before you come across a Terry Fulp, whose heifer won second prize at the 1967 Franklin, Indiana State Fair. And it dawns on me, was that you? Was that your heifer?
It could have been.
I'll assume it was not. All right. I better stop there. Terry?
All right, thank you very much, Doug. First of all, let me say a couple things. That nice of an introduction, I am not going to take my 1 minute to rebut it, but I'm going to give that 1 minute to Mike Cohen, wherever he is, because I think he deserves it. There he is. So it's just great to be back here. It's a great conference. Thanks for hosting us, as always, Doug and the Law Center. For those who do know me, you know that I don't have heifers in my background, but I do come from a very small town in the middle of the country, and I would have never thought anyone would introduce me as the water master of anything. So with all that being said, it's great to be back in Boulder. I'm from the other Boulder right now. I will come back to this Boulder someday, because 90 degrees is a hell of a lot better than 110. So in any event, it's great to be here. Doug asked me to address he gave me the question, how does DCP address Lake Mead's math problem? So most of you know that I am probably at best overeducated. Too many college degrees is probably what I would say. That's okay, I guess. I always seem to find something else interesting to go back to school for. But what I do want to say is there's a simple thing here, arithmetic versus mathematics, right? So arithmetic is about numbers, and mathematics is about theory primarily, and it gives you all the rules to manipulate the numbers, right? And so what I'm going to focus on here is the arithmetic. And I'm going to leave all the manipulations over here to this part of the panel, right? So as we go, see if that's how it works out. Okay, let me start with this simple arithmetic. The diagram on the right just shows the main reservoirs on our main stem of the Colorado, Hoover, Davis, and Parker dams and the associated reservoirs. But the numbers are really what this is about. So this set of numbers I first wrote down in the late 1990s, probably it was 1999, might have been early 2000s. We were doing an environmental impact statement for, guess what, interim surplus guidelines. Lake Mead was so full that we went down to the lip of the spillway, concrete spillways on the side of the dam, if you've seen those, capacity of over 400,000 acre feet of water. And we were looking to make sure the automatic gates were going to rise in next year's runoff because we felt that assured that we were headed that direction. And you all know what happened. We headed a different direction. So as we were putting together these interim surplus guidelines, I'm going to quickly tell this story at the risk of not using all of my time, Doug. So Kevin, I think we should call ourselves senior statesmen, and we can do that. You are grayed, I'm bald, but the key is we've been around a long time, right? That's it. So we can tell such stories. We can tell them until the point one of you comes up and says, I've heard that story so many times, quit. Okay, so we'll take that, right, when that happens. So sitting in this team of environmental impact statement consultants and others, might have been some beer involved. We weren't mostly Californians, so I know it wasn't wine. And the lead consultant and I wanted to motivate the team a little more, and we said, why don't we do a little game and everyone write down where you think this system is going to go from here on. And we had a whole lot of ideas. To court, of course, was one. I mean, there were many, many ideas. Mine happened to be Lake Mead will go down. The only reason I said Lake Mead would go down, I had no hydrologic forecasting ability. I still don't. Those of you that work with me know that. Or even projection capability, really, as we have today. But I'd done this little calculation. And I'd done it earlier that day. I just happened to do it to get an idea of what is going on at Lake Mead. And what you see quickly is this is your checkbook balance. And we, at the time, we're getting about 9 million acre feet coming in from Powell and side inflows out of the Grand Canyon. And our outflows were between 9.3 and 9.6 million acre feet a year. That's 9 million to meet the apportionments and the treaty with Mexico, plus the other losses downstream. And then we lose 600,000 acre feet a year on Mead. So add it all up, there it is, a negative 1.2 million acre feet. So let's just look at what happens at Lake Mead. Here are the elevations starting in that period. That's the beginning of the water year 2000 and moving on to today, and you see what Lake Mead has done. It was above elevation 1200. As I said, it was lapping at 1205 at the end of 1999, and we immediately fell, and we fell really fast. And we fell so fast because of the drought that happened. Now, the drought happened, but what also was going on? We have an unbalanced checkbook. We live in the lower basin on high flows. The upper basin certainly knows that. And we have lots of legal and policy foundation on how to continue to try to make that happen. And I think our challenge is to continue on that path to put in additional policy that will continue to make it happen. Well, what's the real policy we need? We got to stop the decline of Mead when you're not getting high flows. So how do you do that? Well, you can import water. That's not going to happen anytime soon. Or you can reduce demand. And so we've been on a path of reducing demand to take care of this problem, and that's essentially the drought contingency plan. Let me get to a little more detail in a moment. So I'm going to show you this. We call it a teacup diagram. You can tell why. I'm only showing it for a couple reasons. There's a lot of detail on it. Where we are now, 1081 is the elevation. Again, remember in 1999, we were at 1205. 1075 is the first shortage as we define in the interim guidelines. We'll talk just a little bit more of that in a minute. And I want to point out as we go down, the shortages go up. That makes sense to you. And at the bottom, at level 3, 1025, if your eyes can go to that place, that we have about 625,000 acre feet of total reductions in place at 1025. We now know what do we need to stop a decline at Mead. If we're getting an 823 release, we need twice that, right? So we knew this at the time. We put the interim guidelines in 2007. So surplus guidelines in 2001, they were signed. what we call the Lower Basin Shortage and Coordinated Operation of Lake Powell and Lake Mead guidelines. We signed them in '07 and operated first in 2008. So what were we trying to do? We were trying to put a good operation in place to coordinate our big reservoirs operation, and we were also putting in the first real shortage guidelines that the Secretary has the authority very clearly from parts of the law of the river, primarily the Supreme Court decree, to do that. So we knew we didn't put enough shortages in place if the drought continued, but we felt that it was probably, if I could say it this way, good enough, given what the negotiation brought us, and us as all of us that were collectively involved in the basin. And so knowing that we could get to this 1025 range, we put in a provision that says if we get to 1025 and we're projected to go to 1,000, we'll all get back together. I know that sounds a little tenuous, doesn't it? At the time, it sounded better than it sounds today, if I could say it that way. The other point of this diagram is to show you the shape, and the shape means as you go down in the reservoir, a foot of water is less water volumetrically, right? Just by the shape. So when we're down at 1,025 feet, we have about 6 million acre feet of water in a 25 million acre foot reservoir. If you're trying to deliver, even with those shortages at the time, you're going to be delivering over 8 million acre feet of water every year still. 9 million minus 625,000, right? So you won't have potentially a lot of time to figure out what else to do, right? So that's really the learning we had in the first 10 years of the guidelines, is seeing the severity of this drought. Absolutely the worst in the recorded history, one of the top 3 worst, if I could say it that way, in 1,200 years of tree rings, and absolutely not the worst in terms of climate modeling. Might be in that 20th percentile or something of the worst. So again, this slide is only to show you one other thing, and that is I assume you'll put the slides out, this is the combined storage of Powell and Mead. That's 83% of our total amount of storage on the basin, roughly, at least on the main stem and the major tributaries. A good way to look at the health of the system is the combined storage of Powell and Mead. We were 95% full, over nearly 50 million acre feet of water in storage in 1999. The other piece I want you to have is the inflows, and those are the light blue bars at the bottom, and it shows what the inflows have done over this past 15 to 17 years. I guess it's really probably 17 or 18 now on that chart. So I won't go into any more detail in the interest of time. So what did we do in terms of drought contingency planning? Well, first, let me remind you again, we put in the interim guidelines for lower basin shortages and this coordinated operation, okay? We also then signed Minute 3.2X. You're going to hear a lot about our work with Mexico from Commissioner Dracena and others on that panel right after lunch. It is crucial work. Keep in mind that in 1999, when we were doing the surplus guidelines, we didn't yet have a California 4.4 plan. Kevin mentioned that. That wouldn't come to play until 2003. We didn't have agreements with Mexico, although the treaty says that there's I'll call it a reduction provision that under extraordinary drought, the Mexican deliveries will be delivered essentially in proportion to the U.S. reductions. But we didn't have any operational guidelines. All of that had to evolve in that 10-year period after we put surplus guidelines in, and hardly used them. Maybe 1 year, we used them 1 year. So one learning is, if you want something to happen, don't prepare for it, but prepare for something else. And then that's what'll happen, right? It'll be the opposite. But in any event, we put in 319. Mexico, Minute 319, Mexico serves with reductions in proportion of the U.S. users. Now we're doing a new one, and we need to do that new agreement by the end of this year. Again, I'm going to leave that to the next panel. We've done a lot of other drought mitigation efforts locally, and I want to make sure and commend all the water districts who have been locally conserving water for a number of years, and you'll probably hear more about that from some of these panelists. With that all being said, drought contingency planning is what? It's an overlay on the interim guidelines. So it's all actions in addition to what we would take already in the interim guidelines. The idea is to reduce our risk of getting down to that critically low elevation, and I'll call it, for today's purposes, 1,025 feet of lake elevation and 6 million acre feet of water in storage. And I think the other thing it does is it sets us up for the next round of negotiations. The interim guidelines in 2026, the provision said that no later than December 31st, 2020, we'll all sit down and start working on what we should be doing after 2026. Notice we gave ourselves 5 years or whatever that is. We're likely to need 5 years. But we're also really likely to need a stable environment during that time. What we don't want is to have a reservoir that's run out of water or is so close to running out of water that we have to do something really fast, and it will be very difficult to want to look longer term. Okay, so that's the idea behind drought contingency planning. This table gives you the numbers. I just want to say a couple things about the table. Look in the lower right-hand corner. I knew I would do this. They told me which button to push. It's a total reduction of 1.1 million, okay? If we add in what's currently being negotiated with Mexico, that we are extremely optimistic that we'll bring this home this year, then we'll get a total of almost 1.4. 1.375, I think is the actual number, okay? So this is all the stuff on the U.S. side, the shortage guidelines, the additional DCP, and then add in the Mexico piece, and we're at 1.4, let's say. So we're really solved our checkbook balance, except for in the really dire hydrologies. There's still hydrologies out there that's not enough water. We're willing to take that risk today on those other hydrologies for all these reasons I just mentioned. So I will leave that at that point. And let me conclude, and you all knew I'd have to bring us a plot. Come on, I can't not come here, Doug, without a plot. And so on the vertical axis is the projected chance of lake mean elevation being less than 1025, 0 to 40% on the horizontal axis. We have the year 2008 up through 2026, essentially the implementation period of the interim guidelines, okay? The dark black line, I'm gonna try to hit the right button. There we go. Hopefully you can see that. I know it's hard out there probably to see. This is the risk or chance we assessed when we were putting the interim guidelines together. With the hydrology information we had at the time, that's the risk we thought we would see of mead getting to 1025 in any year out of that 19-year period is what it actually is. This is the risk in January 2007, simply using the now expanded hydrologic record that includes the current drought. And again, we're 17-year drought for sure in the record, so you can see the impact of that. And the dotted blue line is the chance of being below 1025 if we implement the drought contingency plan in the lower basin and minute 32X as currently envisioned. So we believe we have where we need to be, and although we're not there yet, I'm the second cockeyed optimist you will hear from today. We will get there this year, in my opinion. The real question is it enough? And we will have to grapple with that question as we roll forward in 2020 and beyond to figure out what we're going to do longer term in this basin. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Terry. Again, we'll roll through the presentations and then take questions afterwards. Up next is Tom Bushatsky. And I've only met Tom once or twice over the years, so I don't think I can have really earned the right to pick on him because I don't know him that well. But there's no need to pick on Tom because he's the director of the Arizona Department of Water Resources, and that's a really tough gig. And again, you can rebut that if you want, but that's a tough gig. He's been a key player in Arizona water management issues since 1982. Working on a variety of issues on the Colorado, including the Arizona Groundwater Management Act implementation and a few other things. I'll just say this, Tom is another one of these people that's sufficiently famous that if you Google him, you will get him. But then again, there's probably not a lot of, I can't even say it, Bushatskys out there, so, okay. Tom, do you have a PowerPoint or?
Yeah, I do.
All right. What did we do with Sean? I don't even know how we run in this show here.
I can help you.
Can you? I don't even know how we loaded this.
How about, let me see if I can help you. I just happen to watch.
Well, you're ahead of me then. Okay.
Oh, there'll be some way to tell it to run the slideshow. How about that way? There we go.
Perfect.
See, I haven't lost everything.
Why you invite engineers to our meeting?
He's from the government.
Think about
He's from the government.
all of our
He's here.
presentations and see how it went. I'm not going to
Probably
take
would
that.
go okay. So, good morning, everyone. I guess the question I was asked to answer, and it shows in the brochure, is the DCP good for Arizona? Well, the short answer is yes. Unfortunately, there's some buts that attach to that yes, because the benefits and the impacts of the Drought Contingency Plan do not fall evenly over our water users, tribes, cities, agriculture, industry, and worse yet, within a specific tribe or within a specific city, they don't fall equally. So that is one of the challenges that I have to try to address, is dealing with a diverse group of stakeholders. And you might be aware that for me to be able to sign off on the DCP on behalf of the state of Arizona, I have to get the concurrence of my legislature. Unfortunately, I'm the only state of the 7 states that has that fun little process to go through. So I need a lot of support at the legislature from water users who are all impacted in many different ways. So my presentation will explain essentially a lot of those impacts and explain where we're going. Terry's slide, the graphic slide, when he talked about bending the curve, it said DCP Mexico and DCP Plus. If you read the fine print, DCP Plus is part of what I'll be talking about today. That's an intra-Arizona deal to help partially mitigate the impacts on the water users. So some quick background. Here's a graphic of the state's water budget, about 7 million acre feet of water, 41% of which comes from the Colorado River. So obviously an extremely important part of our water supply. Breaking down the Colorado River use into different sectors, you can see there, I won't go through all of this. You can see tribes have a very large percentage of the water, and agriculture still obviously is a huge water user as well. And I put this graphic up, a map of Arizona showing the Colorado River and the Central Arizona Project Aqueduct, which moves about 1.5 million or so, 1.6 million annually from the Colorado River to Central Arizona, the rest being used on the river. But we put these priorities on there so that you can understand how the impacts might flow to the water users in Arizona. And if you look along the river, you can see down at the south end in the Yuma area, those are the highest priorities of Colorado River water in Arizona, priorities 1 through 3. We have priority 4 users as well, further up the river, some of it's agriculture, some of it's industry, some of it's municipal use. That priority 4 shares the same priority with the Central Arizona Project. You can see the arrow there to the CAP blue service area. So again, it's really important. The folks in priority 1 through 3 do not really get impacted by shortages to Arizona and don't have a near-term impact or hopefully never will have an impact from the guideline shortages and the DCP shortages. Quickly, the shortage volumes under the guidelines. You can see the elevations of Lake Mead, the reductions that Arizona takes, the reductions Nevada takes, the reductions California don't take, and the reductions that Mexico take and have agreed to take under Minute 319, which of course expires at the end of this year. You did see in Terry's DCP slide that California would be agreeing in DCP to do some savings programs that would allow them to take those reductions that you saw on that chart. So the impacts, again, Central Arizona Project is largely the junior priority in the lower basin. Technically under the law, the CAP and those other priority 4 users I showed you would go completely dry before California would take any shortage reduction. So those would have huge impacts, obviously, on the state of Arizona, trillions of dollars worth of economy. The drought contingency plan does create more certainty and greater protection of Colorado River supplies, but again, it does so for the higher priority users essentially within the CAP, and I have some slides that will explain that. Terry already talked about how the DCP adds to the guidelines, and he also talked about the modeling and the positive benefit on the probabilities, the bending of the curve. So here are essentially the CAP priority pools. The other excess, the least secure water supply, that other excess water goes to underground storage by the Arizona Water Banking Authority, replenishment of groundwater pumped, replenishment done by the Central Arizona Water Conservation District under the guise of the Central Arizona Groundwater Replenishment District. Then our agricultural users within CAP, then this non-Indian agricultural priority, the orange band, which that water is allocated to tribes and cities essentially, but there's probably 3 tribes and 1 city that has about 70% of that water. And then the higher priority water, the original CAP allocations to Indian tribes in the dark blue, to municipal industrial contractors in the light blue, and then a little sliver of priority 3 that got moved out of Yuma pursuant to some Indian water rights settlements. So you can see with these red dashed lines under Tier 1 of the shortage guidelines today, about half, all of the excess, all of the other excess, the gray, and about half of the ag pool would go away. If we add in the drought contingency plan reductions for Arizona, 192,000 acre feet at elevation 1090, you can see all of the agricultural pool is wiped out and a little bit of the NIA priority pool. So much different impacts than the shortage guidelines. Going down to Tier 2, under the shortage guidelines, almost all of the ag pool is wiped out, and virtually all of the NIA priority pool would be wiped out as well when you add in the next DCP reduction for Arizona, 240,000 acre feet. Moving on then to Tier 3, you can see a little sliver again of the NIA priority water, again, tribes and cities. With the DCP additional reduction, you actually lose a sliver of the Indian priority and MI priority water. What the DCP actually does is it protects the reliability of that Indian and MI priority water. That's what it does. So it protects the higher priority users, but it creates some issues and some harm, some impacts to the lower priority users that they were not anticipating when we signed on to the 2007 guidelines. So the challenge is to how to keep those people who are impacted but who don't benefit. Again, going back, agricultural water users do not benefit from DCP+. So we came up with this concept of the Lower Basin Drought Contingency Plan Plus. We worked on that last fall. It was a little bit different plan. The modeling results you saw from Terry were with the old plan. That plan was trying to conserve over a 3-year period 1.2 million additional acre feet of water, of Arizona's water in Lake Mead through various methods to try to keep Lake Mead above elevation 1075. By doing that, you kind of keep the impact on the agricultural users at the same level it was with just the guidelines. Knowing that you can't make sure that you're going to stay above 1075, it really becomes a risk analysis and a comfort level of the agricultural users and others in terms of how the impacts were going to fall on them. And essentially, that drought contingency plus plan in the fall was taking probabilities of the lake going below 1075 from 55% down to like 15%, and in outer years, 35 or so percent, or sorry, 50 or so percent down to about 30 to 35%, something that I think our water users would have accepted and would have given me the support at the legislature. Then a bad thing happened. It started snowing in the upper basin. There were expectations of equalization and huge volumes of water coming down. The probabilities of the lake going below 1075, just from the hydrology, basically were almost equivalent to what we were trying to accomplish with the drought contingency plan plus. So we had to kind of go back to the drawing board a little bit and rework the drought contingency plan plus. And we are still in the process of working on the drought contingency plan plus. We have our technical folks putting together a proposal, a lot of modeling in that proposal. We're reaching out and have had a meeting with the technical folks from the Central Arizona Project, who of course were working closely with us on the original drought contingency plan plus. So kind of conceptually, we are testing buffer levels above 1075 to try and target how much water we would need to conserve to keep the lake above 1075. We're probably looking really at about 1080 as the buffer level, based on how much water we might be able to actually conserve and the need for actually conserving that water. We would be determining how much required conservation we need to meet those buffer levels, putting a system conservation program and a funding agreement in place to make sure that we would have some water available and some money to conserve that water under the traditional system conservation program, funding reduction in use, keeping that water in Lake Mead. But we also know that we have the intentionally created surplus tool that will be part of this. And we're looking to make sure that the intentionally created surplus pool will be available to the non-Indian water users, but also Indian tribes who, within Central Arizona Project, have about half of the Central Arizona Project water. We need them to be partners with us. We need to put the meat on the bones of that tribal intentionally created surplus program, because of course, the folks doing the ICS are the ones paying for it. And so it would reduce the cost essentially to the state and others of having to fund system conservation. We're looking at a rolling 5-year plan out through 2026, and we want to have some flexibility built into that plan so we can make adjustments on an annual basis. So we probably have some time ahead of us to work on that plan. I will say this, that the state of Arizona is strongly committed to delivering the drought contingency plan itself. We need the drought contingency plan plus to also be delivered. The governor of Arizona, Governor Ducey, has stated publicly that delivering the drought contingency plan is his #1 issue in water for the state of Arizona. He actually put in his FY18 budget $6 million for my department to be used to help fund system conservation, and every other dollar he had available to him, he pretty much put into education. So again, we are very committed to doing this. We have some big issues to work through with our water users, adjusting our plan from where it was last fall, building up support for that. Going to take a few months to do that. My next opportunity to be at the state legislature won't be until January of 2018. And so we'll want to try to deliver the DCP Plus sometime reasonably before that, hopefully in the August or September timeframe. So with that, I thank you for your attention.
right, thank you, Tom. Next up is Governor Stephen Rowe Lewis of the Gila River Indian Community. The Gila River Indian Community, I believe, is CAP's single largest water entitlement holder. Someone will correct me if I'm wrong. So if you're looking to be creative in managing CAP water in Arizona, you need the Gila River Indian Community on board, and increasingly they are. I'm going to say one thing about your background that I find particularly interesting is that is you are an acclaimed filmmaker. And it was on my list of things to do this week to watch, and I didn't get it done, so I apologize for that. But it's still on my list of things to do, so thank you.
Thank you. Skutchianik, Shapai Masma, Anya Panjugut, Governor Stephen Rowe Lewis from the Gila River Indian Community, home of the Akima Atama Peeposh people. It's really an honor to be able to talk about critical issues along the Colorado River, water in general. And I think, as we know, water in general in the Southwest, and particularly with the issues in regards to Standing Rock, in regards to just a multitude of issues. I think this is a timely, and in regards to the international context as well. And I think for me, I think talking about the really positive role that we're doing within the Gila River Indian community, it's as much about telling the story and the history of our people as well moving forward. Now, first of all, I'd like to thank, of course, the organizers for allowing me to present, but also, too, I'd like to also really thank two of my fellow panelists here, Tom and Terry, really for their efforts on behalf of the Arizona Department of Water Resources and Reclamation, respectively. Thank you for being just tremendous partners as we move forward with some very difficult and complex issues. Now, what I want to go to first, and being I think we've all had past chapters in our lives. I was a filmmaker, working with Ted Turner and working with the Sundance Film Festival when I was a lot younger, and also went to the Kennedy School of Government as well before I came back to my community. And even though with a lot of varied experience, I never thought I would have to really immerse myself in the fine tunings and the very technical nature of water management. I think that was the last thing I was thinking that I would have to have really immersed myself in. But this is it's such an expanding field. Whether it's legal, whether it's technical, whether it has to do with policy. It's an amazing undertaking, and that's why, again, I think, and a little word about my father, Rod Lewis, who has been an attorney for our community, just recently retired for over 30 years, and he was one of the first Native Americans to be admitted to the bar in Arizona and to argue a Supreme Court case successfully. It was a taxation case, and this was in 1980, and this was Central Machinery versus Arizona. So he was the first Native American actually to take a case to the U.S. Supreme Court and actually to prevail, to win. So he really set the standard for and devoted his whole life to our water settlement. And so this is something that is ingrained in my family tradition moving forward, and this is something that I hope that we impress upon as him being one of our revered leaders, not only my father, but back in the community for a new generation, at least with Gila River, a new generation of farmers, agriculturalists, those going into the legal and water aspects moving forward. So I just wanted to put that out there as well, because I would not be here without my father. Or my mother. so that's going to get back to So we trace ourselves to our historic origins, our historic Hoogam people. This was over a 2,000-year agricultural history along the banks of the Gila rivers and Salt River. And we used to, the old people used to call it the Kuriakama, which meant Old Man River. You know, you think about the Old Man River in context of the Mississippi, but we actually thought of the Gila River in that term as well, that took care of us, that nurtured us in many different ways. And from the 1790s through the 1860s, the Hooligan, our ancestors, they really had a very huge agricultural imprint within the valley, the southern valley of metropolitan Phoenix, that whole area of flood and irrigation agriculture. And so in 1860, the Akiwautam, who we call ourselves the people of the river, and the Pequash, the Maricopa people who were human speaking and who from the Yuma area, from the Colorado River, who came and they joined in the military and a military alliance as well as an economic alliance, and we produced more than 2 million pounds of grain annually and cultivated over 15,000 acres. And of course, the source of our economy was the Gila River and its tributaries. Now, I think beginning one of the stat chapters of our community was the post-Civil War theft of communities' water causes and a decline in agriculture and the subsistence levels. And this really was one of the times what we called one of the time of and there was an autumn word for it, which means starving, which means starving and dying. And this was, we had people and children and elders that were dying of starvation and famine. And this was a direct result of the upstream damming and the curtailment of our farming and agricultural production that helps sustain us. And so, of course, the loss of the natural flow of the Gila River, and which I'll get back to, was ultimately very devastating to us. So, when the community, our earliest tribal leaders, when we took our historic fight to court in regards to our claims to the Gila River water, two of the original claims, the most important goals were to restore agricultural economy and to bring back the flow of the river. Now, ingrained in that is the Arizona Water Settlement Act of 2004. And the community pursued this struggle for over 130 years in court. And finally, in 2004, Congress approved our water settlement. And like all settlements, it included a number of trade-offs, though. But most importantly, it included a large entitlement and a funding to ensure that our water could be used on our community lands. But one of the trade-offs was that the natural flow of the Gila River was not restored. Instead, by design, the Colorado River Basin Project Act that the community received, received Colorado River water as a supplement or in lieu supply for Gila River water. So in lieu of the Gila River water, we got Colorado River water to supplement our water settlement, our water claim. So, as was referred to earlier, this made the community the single largest entitlement holder of the Colorado River water, served by the Central Arizona Project, CAP, but with this large amount of CAP water came risks as well, associated with the rising costs of CAP delivery charges. So, with that, of course, we talk about the rising cost of delivery charges, the settlement, which did not return the natural flow of the Gila River, and the Colorado River drought measures, which could impact the CAP water supply. Those were the challenges that our tribal leadership was facing. And also, and then I would say, since our settlement became enforceable in late 2008, the settlement was very much, a new beginning for our people moving forward. But how are we going to, to carry this out? How are we going to, in a very meaningful fashion, make this water settlement implemented throughout our community? And so our elders, our community members, our families were very concerned about that moving forward. And so one of the things, before I was lieutenant governor for 3 years, we have a constitutional form of government, 17 council members. We have a lieutenant governor and a governor, and that's the executive body, along with our legislative branch, which is our council. And where we're chosen by the community, we have seven historic communities that make up 7 districts in our community. And so the governor and lieutenant governor were voted in by all of the districts in a general election every 3 years. And one of the important things when I became governor, I had the fortunate opportunity to become governor, was that this was just over 10 years after our water settlement was passed. And I made an executive order that we were going to rededicate ourselves to implementing our water settlement, that we were going to both, in a very real sense, teach this in our schools, that we were going to document this and calling upon my past efforts as a filmmaker, document what water means to our community with our elders, use this as teaching tools, getting really recommitting all of our community members politically, historically, culturally, to our water settlement, re-engage our community, that this is the lifeblood and the future sustainability of our people itself moving forward, and to get our people behind this. And this was one of my first actions as governor. And with that, working with our council, we created the Gila River Water Storage. It was an LLC to market our stored water, to help fund future water costs. A lot of this had to do with out-of-date infrastructure, water infrastructure. And I think the genius of our water settlement was that, of course, with water settlements, especially Indian tribal water settlements, is that there's a difference between paper water and wet water. You might clarify and get your water settlements confirmed, but if you don't have resources to actually have your water delivered to you, have a water infrastructure to bring that actual water to your native lands, that's something that tribes have dealt with very difficult situations in past water settlements. And for Gila River, we have a fund that creates resources, what it's called the Pima Maricopa Irrigation Project, and that is not only refabbing canals and refabbing and actually bringing water with canal systems with the latest technology from our districts 1 through 7 across our reservation, our wells, our laterals. And so this should be effectively built out, providing water throughout our community to all of those agricultural intensive areas, those ag acreage that we want to start farming again. This should be built out in another 7 to 8 years. And this is a multi-million-dollar project. We're employing community members. This is also an opportunity for our community members to go back and to get training and get their degrees in hydrology and environmental engineering and all types of water engineering as well. And so this is really becoming a very positive thing for our community. Also, working with the community council, we adopted a 5-year water plan that required the creation of a permanent water fund to make sure that the rising costs of water would be covered in a sustainable way, that we would have a water fund available to make sure that we could afford the rising cost of CAP water moving forward. And of course, our on-reservation infrastructure improvements. to increase the groundwater capacity and return parts of the Gila River. And I want to go not too much into that, but what we're looking at too is the recharge projects as well. One of our first recharge projects is what we call the MAR 5. And this is located centrally in within the Gila River Indian community. It's a managed aquifer recharge where we're actually storing water and actually bringing back the flow of the river in about a 10 to 15 mile segment of the river. We've done this and we've started to test this out, and it was incredible. Within less than a year, the land started to literally heal itself. The flora and the fauna started to come back, the birds, the insects, the animals, the plants. It's an amazing area there where we're actually, and this is no small feat as well, because we were known for our fine baskets, fine artistry and basket making and pottery, and a lot of our traditional medicines were found at the river. And so to actually have, and so we, to have those plants and those fibers and those clays come back with the flow of the river, this is really also fostering a cultural, a spiritual, a very meaningful awakening of our people to going back and moving back and revisiting and learning about all of our traditional arts, all of our traditional medicine ways as well. So this is, this is very fundamentally important to us as keeping our culture, keeping our language, keeping our traditional life. It's what we call our himidak, our Atham himidak, which means literally our way of life. Now, moving forward, getting back to the DCP. Under DCP, of course, we talked about that magic number, 1075, and how that would affect all stakeholders moving forward. But importantly, though, this cuts would also limit the community's non-Indian ag CAP water and reduce our ability to store water to generate revenue for a permanent fund. So this has a cascading effect as well. This cuts into our long-term storage planning, and also, looking at these recharge projects where we're building up our groundwater capability, our pumping capability, and would really put a damper on developing more of those managed aquifer recharge sites through our community as well. In fact, we're one of the first agreements that we're working with the city of Phoenix. Hopefully, we're in the final stages of this. And in fact, next week I'll be there with our Mayor Stanton with Phoenix City Council meeting to discuss the final negotiation points in regards to the city of Phoenix will be storing their water in our managed aquifer recharge areas. And so this is really the first of its kind where we have, and this is all in the larger issue of DCP, of making sure that we manage our water in a very sustainable way in the overall issues of drought management. So, DCP Plus. This was a very important approach because how DCP was originally floated as an idea, as a plan. There were very serious issues, as I said, very serious that would negatively impact the community moving forward. And so I'd like to thank Terry for working together on this, on DCP Plus. And then this is something that actually works for the community in some very specific areas. DCP Plus, of course, is an Arizona stakeholder proposal to reduce the risk of Lake Mead. It's paid system conservation. It creates and it allows the community to participate in intentionally create a surplus ICS. In the community, we really, we're very fortunate that we have the opportunity to play a very meaningful role. And to also make large portions of the CAP, the CAP cap supply available over short term for system conservation, ICS to reduce the risk of DCP cuts to Arizona water users, increasing groundwater capacity. And a lot of this, the community was actually doing already, as I talked about earlier, in regards to creating our water fund, looking at our own sustainability. We were able to react very quickly to DCP and to DCP Plus because we were looking along the same lines of ourselves within the community as well. And, really, we answered the call. We saw that there were serious issues developing, serious environmental issues, serious issues in regards to water and drought. And we wanted to be, in fact, to leverage the community being the largest, one of the largest entities of CAP, of Colorado River Water, but really in a meaningful way, that moral authority to actually put water in to help with this conservation effort and to be a model, not only for other tribes, but to show other entities as well that we're willing to answer the call when very drastic water issues come up. This is something that our elders, that our council members, our elected leaders, that they felt very important about. That if we can do something positive, because we just by the basis of the water resources that we had fought for, and actually going back and doing something very meaningful to be caretakers, to be stewards of the water. This was very important going back to what I said, what our roles are, caretakers for the water, or what we call water is life, Shridak. That goes back to our Atum, Himadak, who we are. So this fits in very well with our value system. Now, as I alluded to, this was actually maybe 3-4 months ago. This is actually at the Martz site. You'll notice we have our infrastructure there, which creates 3 channels, and you'll notice that this is the water that is running. All of this now is green, even where the rocks are. There's willow, cattail, all types of those traditional riparian flora and fauna. You can go out there. You can see, you close your eyes, and you can hear the birds. You can hear all of those, water, river animals and birds, and it's an amazing thing. It really touches the heart. And for elders who even thought that maybe they would never see the flow of the river again, this is happening in a very fundamental way. And this is a small beginning, but a very important beginning for our community to actually also to bring back that flow of the river. And it's important for our children to see, because our children have gone, and we have, and myself, I've never seen the flow of the river. Maybe once when we had in the 80s when we had very, very heavy rains, a very thick snowpack. But most of our children have never seen, and this is who they are. They're called Akima'atam people, and people of the river. But where is the river really? And so to actually show them that we are bringing back the river in a very beginning fashion is very powerful for the morale, for the overall well-being of our people, to give them hope that all of this planning, all of this sacrifice for fighting for our water, you can actually start to see this now in a very real way. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, moving on. Next is Jeff Keitlinger. He's GM and CEO of the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California, which serves 19 million customers. I just can't get over that, 19. And with an annual operating budget of 1.8 billion. He's kind of a big deal, you know. That's and you asked me what he was wondering what would come up on his Google search. Well, page after page after page of things about you, and they're all really flattering. And it makes me wonder if you have a staff that large and a budget that large, you can really manage your web presence effectively. And I even did an image search, and all I could conclude from the image search is that you have a lot of really nice suits. So I'm going to stop there. Do you have slides?
No, of course
Oh,
not.
okay, good. Makes it easy.
No, actually, when we did this, we decided that we would go from the most industrious, hardworking to the laziest part of the panel. And then John and I decided that we wouldn't even bother to go to the podium. We'll just talk from here. And the only reason I beat out John is he decided he wouldn't even put on his coat. So he's last, and I'm next. The question I was asked to answer is, what brings Southern California to the table? And, well, good manners, of course, will always come to the table. But it was also, I looked at it as what's in it for Southern California, the DCP. And, the real glib flip answer might be not much. If you looked at Tom's chart that he showed, what we've agreed to is between elevation 1075 and 1025, California contributes nothing to that shortage. The legally required contributors are primarily Arizona and to some extent Nevada. And we, in California, think that's pretty much appropriate. And there's a reason we feel it's appropriate, and it's not all just self-interest and laziness. It is, we put in, about over $1 billion of effort and a tremendous amount of pain over the last 15 years to reduce ourselves from 5.3 million acre feet to 4.4 million acre feet. It was a huge effort within California. All our districts contributed heavily to it. Kevin's district has contributed mightily to it, which is, you saw all the issues of the Salton Sea associated with that contribution, and we are grappling with that within California. But like most glib flip answers, it doesn't really tell the story. Both Kevin and I and our agencies, IID and Metropolitan, realize there is a lot of enlightened self-interest for us to be part of this DCP discussion. We have a very large interest in this and getting this right. And it's not so much for us that it might be for Arizona, the issue about 1075, elevation 1075. For us, the nightmare scenario is getting down to 1025. Because between 1025 and the next 30, 35 feet from there, which we've learned in this past decade can go pretty quickly, is dead pool. And California has about 600,000 to 700,000 acres of incredibly productive farmland, the bulk of it in Kevin's service area, that is 100% reliant on Colorado River water. Metropolitan, as Doug just kindly pointed out, we serve 1 in every 2 Californians. The Southern California economy metropolitan service area is about the 12th largest in the world. That's about 1 in every 15 Americans we serve. And we get 25% of our water from the Colorado River. And the idea of us suddenly losing 25% of our water would be beyond catastrophic. It would be essentially irreplaceable. Even the monumental task of adding 15 desal plants, 1 every 4 miles between San Diego and LA, not likely to happen. And that would be the equivalent of replacing our Colorado River water supply. So be a huge impact and something we have to see doesn't happen. And so therefore, it is in our incredibly strong interest to ensure we don't get close to 1025. So that's what brings us to the table. Less the concern of 1075 elevation, but very strong concern that we don't get too far beyond that. Now, one of the reasons we had some earlier hesitations as we worked through this deal, and are both IID and Metropolitan very carefully and conscientiously trying to get to what's the right mix and balance of people stepping up to their legal requirements, but Southern California ensuring that our interests are protected. is that we had also some very strong pressing issues within California that impact us in a more immediate time frame than, say, the slide towards 1025. Kevin has a very strong interest, IID, that area, in the Salton Sea, and you saw that discussion here. The impacts are being felt today by current transfers. The mitigation water to the Salton Sea runs out in 2017, this year, and those are significant impacts that are going to continue and have to be addressed and dealt with. Metropolitan has always strongly supported that IID concern in working through Salton Sea issues in principle, but not in our checkbook. We've always made that clear. But we want to see that resolved. We want to see California figure out a path forward, and we understand that there has to be progress on the Salton Sea to ensure that both the transfers continue, and obviously if we're going to give more water through this DCP approach, we have to have some sort of solution to the Salton Sea, because a big chunk of that water will have to be coming from the Imperial Valley. That's just the mathematics or our arithmetic, Terry. The other issue that we had in California is figuring out for Metropolitan what's going on in Northern California. Metropolitan, about 25% of Southern California's water comes from the Colorado River, and 30% comes from Northern California through what we call the State Water Project. This project has been impacted severely by issues associated with California's Bay Delta, endangered species concerns, all sorts of impacts, and we have probably lost about a third of the reliability of the water that we would traditionally get from Northern California due to cutbacks, pumping restrictions, biological opinions, and all sorts of endangered species issues that have greatly reduced our water. We've also been dealing with an incredibly severe drought in California that has also decimated our Northern California supplies. So the idea that we would be volunteering to leave Colorado River water with a very uncertain Northern California supply became a very difficult proposition for at least my board of directors. How do we do this, particularly when we have good legal standing in protecting our Colorado River water rights? And part of that has been, so we needed to work through and come up with some long-term structural approach to the Northern California's water supply, the Bay Delta issue, and do that. We've worked for a decade extremely closely with, starting with Governor Schwarzenegger and now working with Governor Jerry Brown, working through what's called California Water Fix. The idea is that we need to address this with a lot of habitat, but also a very ambitious engineering project. And the engineering solution, the physical solution to this issue, is to bypass California's Bay Delta with a bypass that would be about a $15 billion tunnel system that would divert water around the Delta, well, actually under it, and then bring that to the state and federal water projects that service the whole San Joaquin Valley, the Bay Area, Silicon Valley, and my area, Southern California. Very divisive in California, politically tough issue. It's been kicked around. One of the great ironies is the closest we came to resolving it was in 1982 with the youngest governor we ever had in our state, Jerry Brown, who was dating Linda Ronstadt at the time. And we moved the project forward, and the Northern California voters overwhelmingly rejected the proposal when it went on the ballot, and California decided not to do it. We have then tried all manner of solutions from 1982 to the present to come up with an approach, none of them working or remotely solving the issue. And we've come back to, we all know the physical solution is to bypass this area. This time we're going to do it in tunnels. The oldest governor in California history gets a second crack at it, Jerry Brown. And he wouldn't write that in a movie script, and he's dealing with the exact same issue almost 50 years later. This time around, though, it's now going to move forward to the conclusion of the environmental review process. We have a 120,000-page environmental impact statement that has been finalized and completed at the cost of $250 million in planning alone. We like to do things in a big way in California, at least on the paper side. But it's actually now finalized, and it's projected to be signed by Secretary Zinke and Governor Brown June 23rd this month, 2 weeks. Huge milestone. And that has led us, at least I heard Kevin say, he's a cockeyed optimist about what's going on in the Salton Sea. We feel the same way, that we're actually finally turning a corner, working with our state and federal government, and coming to grappling with and coming to grips with this Bay Delta conundrum that California have wrestled with the last 50 years. And those two milestones of progress then lead us back to then saying, we think we can work through this DCP and come up with solutions. And in our view, probably do that, and we hope to do this. If we can't do it in 2017, then in short order in 2018, and get that wrapped up as well. So those would be two huge issues for us, for Metropolitan, making progress on our Northern California supplies, making progress on getting a reliability, long-term reliability in our Colorado River supplies. And that's our game plan and our story, and we're sticking to it. So, thank you.
Thank you. All right, our final speaker in this session, another overachiever, is John Enswinger, who is General Manager of the Southern Nevada Water Authority and the Las Vegas Valley Water District, and is Nevada's lead negotiator on Colorado River matters. More importantly, he is a graduate of this law school, so welcome back. I'm glad you lost your jacket, because I lost mine too. This room's going to get hot today, I'm afraid. We're not allowed to control the thermostat here by ourselves, because it's part of our terms, I think, of being a LEEDS building, that they don't allow us to touch the thermostat. So it might get a little warm. We actually had get the permission of some people at facilities management to come across campus and tinker with our thermostat, and I think they're going to charge us for it. So, but I'm glad you lost your jacket. Somewhat on that note, let me mention that as a graduate of the law school, some of you may have noticed as you walk down the hallway, there are the class composite photos of the various classes, and if you look at the composite photo of the class of 1999, you can find John's photo, and everyone's listed alphabetically, and so it's pretty easy to find him just that way. The more entertaining way to find John's photo is to start going back and forth with your eyes and the list of people, and don't pay attention to the names, and for that matter, don't pay attention to the faces. Just keep in your mind which of these people forgot it was picture day, and that kind of works. I think you'll concede. So I want everyone to try that at least once during this conference when you're going down that hallway, and tell me if it works for you. But please welcome John.
Well, thank you, Doug. I was actually going to devote my minute of rebuttal to pre-rebutting the panel at 3:15, but I can't really pass that up. And I do invite everyone here to go down the hall, check out the picture, and realize in 1999, the Broncos had just won their first Super Bowl ever. And the real question isn't who forgot it was picture day, but why the hell else nobody else in my law school class was willing to celebrate the Denver Broncos Super Bowl victory. So, our panel at 3:15. This is interesting for me. It says the day concludes with a panel discussion focused on how these three elements, the Salton Sea, DCP, and 32X, all piece together, and if they collectively constitute a true framework of sustainability. I don't want to steal their thunder, but the answer to that question is no. They do not constitute a true framework for sustainability, nor are they intended to. That when we first started negotiating DCP, our overarching goal was to, quote unquote, bend the curve. And Terry showed us our slides of the probabilities of getting to 1020 or 1025, and what actions could we put in place to substantially reduce the probability of getting to those elevations. And the four corners of the document that's been at least preliminarily agreed to between the water users in the lower basin state does that. Again, you saw Terry's slide going from about 20% chance of getting to 1025 to a 5% chance. But all three of those agreements are structured to terminate in 2026. This is not intended as the definitive long-term solution to every problem that exists on the Colorado River. DCP by its very nature, is proactive, voluntary reductions to reduce the probabilities of getting to those truly critical elevations. And as a layover, we call it the Mylar approach during negotiations, on top of the 2007 guidelines in combination with 3.2x. And I will also note Terry's one mathematical error. He didn't include the federal contribution of 100,000 acre feet under DCP. So if you actually,
I don't know how that slipped my mind.
so his 1.375 million acre feet, if the federal government follows through with their commitments, would actually be 1.475 million acre feet, which is obviously, when you look at the math of a structural deficit of 1.2 million acre feet, it is substantial. But we don't know in the lower basin that we're guaranteed 9 million acre feet of water every year. I mean, that's the law, but Mother Nature might have her own opinion on that topic in the coming years. So I just wanted to get my 2 cents in on the long-term sustainability aspect and the intention behind some of these programs. What I was actually invited here to speak about was, it says, how does DCP influence the water picture for Southern Nevada? And the honest answer to that is probably not as much as you think. We saw, beginning in 2002, when we got, the driest year in recorded history in this basin, 25% of normal inflows into Lake Powell. That was our wake-up call. And the hydrology we saw from 2002 to 2007 led us to begin construction of a third intake into Lake Mead, which is now operational, and we're pulling 100% of Nevada's Colorado River entitlement out of that intake today. The hydrology in 2012, 2013 led us at the end of 2014 to make a decision to construct a low lake level pumping station. So in combination, the Nevada DCP, as it were, is close to $1.5 billion in new infrastructure that doesn't add to our capacity to pump water out of the lake by 1 gallon. It is all redundant, call it climate change adaptation, if you like, or drought contingency planning. But we've taken steps to ensure our ability to pump water out of the lake. Now, DCP, if implemented, would have benefits for Nevada by keeping the elevations higher in the lake. Our water quality is substantially improved. When we brought the third intake online, the temperature of water we're pulling into our intakes went down by 14 degrees overnight. So we know that as the lake goes down, the potential for temperatures to rise and impact the water quality we're pulling in is very real. The turbidity as the water level goes down towards our intake would be substantially higher, and we may at some point have to build sedimentation basins in order to address that concern. There are real banking opportunities for Nevada within the DCP. As we sit here today, Nevada can bank our unused water. We're the only lower division state right now with unused water, and we can bank it in California. We can bank it in Arizona. We can pull it out of the lake and inject it into our aquifer in the Las Vegas Valley, but we can't leave it in the lake and get credit for it. We have, in fact, left some of our water in the lake without getting credit for it, but we, like Metropolitan and like the users in Arizona, need additional ICS programs, we believe, in order to optimize how we operate the system and get away from the disincentive of actually requiring water users to take water off the system in order to be able to bank it for the future in their portfolio. I think the most important component of the Lower Basin DCP is the mutual goal of the water users and the 3 states to protect elevation 1020. Even though it's not finalized yet, that's the first time in history that all of us have said there's a point at which we must manage too, because below that point, I think as Jeff and Terry both alluded to, things can get very bad very quickly. At elevation 1020, there's about 5.5 million acre feet of water in live storage. Obviously with current demands at 9.6, that math does not add up. For the upper basin, if we get to elevation 1020, there's a 55% chance within the next 24 months Lake Powell goes below power pool. So this isn't just a lower basin plan, or it doesn't just have benefits for the lower basin. It has benefits for the entire basin, and I think the entire basin should be supporting it and trying to push us towards finalization. Because the alternatives aren't good. If you don't do lower basin DCP, one of your alternatives is hope, right? we just hope it doesn't get worse than it already is. As water manager, I only have 2 million customers, so I feel kind of inadequate next to Jeff. But I do have 7 out of every 10 Nevadans, not just 1 out of 2 in California. I don't like hope as a planning strategy. That does not give me comfort at night. Your other strategy is, just basically wait and see, and then cope with dramatically higher shortages. We're talking about, with everything implemented at 1025, having a shortage of 1.475 million acre feet. If you don't do anything, if we don't start proactively taking these reductions now, I've seen scenarios where you're talking 2.5, 3 million acre feet of water that has to be reduced within the lower basin before, in order to secure these really critical elevations within the lake, and that will ripple upstream. So I firmly believe we need to do everything within our power to finish Minute 32X this year. I don't know that it's logistically possible, just given some of the authorizations that are needed to finish DCP in 2017, but we should do everything we can to finish it in 2018. It may not answer all the questions. It may not be perfection forever, but it's a lot better than just sitting around hoping for the best. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, this is a time for questions and hopefully answers to go with the questions. Questions from the audience, and we got one right here. Go ahead. No, well,
Yeah, for the video.
you can wait 5 seconds and then go. It's a 5-second rule. Okay.
So my question is somewhat relating to the Native American rights that we were talking about, and a little bit in regards to water banks and how abandonment issues might work in Arizona, because the way I'm familiar with it is if you have a water right for a specific right, like agriculture, you go ahead and try and use that right for something else in Colorado, you end up in a big legal mess. And I was wondering, how does the legality work with the Indian tribes and being able to use water for different things? Like maybe some of the key terms of the settlement, and how water banks, or how you guys see water banks being implemented in the future, not only within your own management districts, but also between states.
Well, currently, and every water settlement with tribes is very distinct and separate, and has to do with their own winters, doctrine, water rights, and their own history. And so some tribes, their water settlement is not very able to expand to those type of nascent, water banking, looking at in fact other states as well. For the Gila River Indian community, we negotiated a water settlement with a lot of flexibility in there in regards to working, but it is exclusively within Arizona. So we could not, let's say there was a tribe in Southern California, we could not use our water with a potential deal with maybe a tribe in Southern California. I don't know how that would affect him, if that would make him happy or not. But but basically, what we're looking at is water banking, water credits as well. That's something that we formed, that LLC, and that is working very well for us. That really helped us work toward this very historic deal with the city of Phoenix in system conservation and addressing drought needs. Phoenix, they're just, if you know where the Gila River Indian Community is, we're just south of Phoenix. In fact, Phoenix is our northern border, and so being able to foster good relations with forward-thinking cities like the city of Phoenix, that really does a lot in first steps in planning towards the future. I can't say that for other tribes I know in other states, and even tribes in Arizona. They're very much struggling to fight for their water rights. Even now, you have the largest tribe, land-based wise and population-wise in the United States, the Navajo Nation. They're in a very critical situation as well, where parts of their areas where they don't have any running water at all. The Hopi tribe as well, and also we're looking very. There are other ongoing issues as well that we're monitoring very closely, and this has to do with the Navajo generating station that is closing as well. That's a coal-powered plant that provides the power to bring the Colorado River water down to southern Arizona, down to the Phoenix area, and so that transition from coal-powered power to a lot of the green technologies now. I know Nevada and California, they're already transitioning past that, and so I think what tribes are worried about too is that in this transition, I think it's important for tribes to not get lost in the shuffle. That the tribes have to be a part of this. There is an obligation. There is a real responsibility, a trust responsibility that the federal government has to protect those tribes, protect water as a trust resource moving forward. That is very, I think, first and foremost among tribal leaders that are grappling with this issue. I know with Navajo, if NGS closes, there are environmental issues as well. Of course, with coal power plants and with those surrounding communities, they've been very vocal. But also, if that coal power plant closes, there's going to be over 1,000 jobs that are going to be lost within the Navajo Nation. Those royalties from coal that Hopi has, that would be a loss of 70% of that tribe's overall income. So that is, a very real economic question as well moving forward for those tribes. How are they going to transition? How are they going to look at educating those tribal members that are going to be losing those jobs? How are they going to be able to transition to a new economy, especially the remoteness of those tribes moving forward? The community, we're very concerned about our brother and sister tribes as well, but nonetheless too, as a downstream user, that has very real effects as well in regards to how the federal government is going to deal with this closure. I know Navajo, their legislature, they're dealing with this right now, looking at the possibility about how far they can keep this, how long they can keep this open, and looking at other possibilities as well. Thank you.
Just to add real quickly, the question about the abandonment and how you can use the water. Arizona's lower basin entitlement, the 2.8 million acre feet that I talked about, is not subject to prior appropriation, so there's no issue there. And the underground storage projects that Governor Lewis talked about, the Martz project, under Arizona law, underground storage is considered to be a beneficial use. That's the standard for our Colorado, one of the standards for our Colorado water users. So I think we're covered there, and we can do these things that we're talking about without risk of having impacts on the long-term viability of the right itself.
The other thing I'd add on water banking is we've pursued that pretty aggressively at Metropolitan. In 1990, we had the ability to store about 250,000 acre feet total on our 2 million acre foot plus annual demand. And when we got into trouble in the drought in 1990, we ran out of water really fast and had to ration. We now can bank up to 5 million acre feet through a lot of investment in cooperative partnerships and banking in both groundwater banks and surface water reservoirs. We've built a lot of it ourselves. And it's really the only way we've survived this last 7 years of drought in California is by pulling down our banks. And one of the innovative programs that we put together in 2007 was the ability to store water through intentionally created surplus in Lake Mead, and that has tremendously assisted Met in getting through 2015, the driest year in California on record. We pulled a couple 100,000 acre-feet out of that, and we have faith in this whole DCP going forward. Our original plan this year was to put 200,000 acre-feet into ICS, and we are working with our partners to see if we can increase that and move that closer to 400,000 acre-feet. We want to put that water in Mead and make that bank work, and work with our partners on doing that.
Yeah, I think the banking stuff in the Lower Basin, I think, is often overlooked as some of the best work we've done in the last 20 years. I mean, the majority of mechanisms we have, be that off-stream banking or ICS, the legal mechanisms for that didn't exist in 1998. So we've really come a long way in being able to do that. And for Nevada, we've got 1.8 million acre-feet of water total in all of our different bank accounts, with current demands of about 230,000 acre-feet. So we have about 8 years of our total supply in reserves.
I also want to add, too, that the community, we've already provided 50,000 acre-feet available for system conservation thus far, and are willing to make an additional 40,000 acre-feet available in 2017. So once the stakeholders in Arizona, once we reach an agreement, we can even make more water available in 2018 and beyond. So we're willing, the community is willing to make a real commitment toward that moving forward. That would also include ICS for tribes. Tribes have not been able to use that as a tool. That would be very beneficial in a very real way for tribes to be able to use this as another tool moving forward.
Questions?
We got Ted.
Oh,
Thanks. Yeah, you hinted at it a little bit indirectly in terms of the Mexico agreement, and I know there's a whole panel on it later today, but I think it'd be helpful to get each of your perspectives from federal, state, and local about the importance of an agreement with Mexico. What's the value that you see in reaching an agreement with Mexico, continuing the work that's been done?
Well, I said towards the end of my remarks, I think it's critical to get done. I probably didn't explain why. First and foremost, Minute 319 expires December 31st this year. So we're not going to have a shortage this year, and we may or may not next year. But going into a year, be it 2018, 2019, whatever it is, where there's a shortage condition in the Lower Basin and we don't have an agreement in place with the country of Mexico, that would inject so much uncertainty and the possibility of adversarial relationships that it really just needs to be avoided. I mean, Article 10B of the 1944 treaty is, in my experience, the worst written piece of law I've ever read. And nobody knows what it means. Nobody knows how we will implement it, regardless of who's sitting in the White House or at the desk at Interior. So we have to negotiate in advance to have certainty as to how Mexico will continue to be our partner to share in shortages when we're sharing in shortage, that they would have access to additional water when we have access to additional water, and to establish the programs for restoration of the Delta that I think we took important steps on during Minute 319. And then lastly, just our own, somebody said, enlightened self-interest. I mean, we've talked a lot about the ability of lower basin states to bank water. 319 and 32X give Mexico the ability to bank water in our reservoirs, which help our water quality and helps us produce electrical power and secures all of our water supplies. So, there's no reason not to get 32X done, and there's dozens of very good reasons to get it done.
I'll just add that for Arizona, it's a priority, and like the DCP, the domestic agreements related to 32X that we would be signing, Arizona would be signing. I also needed authority from the state legislature to do that. On March 2nd, Governor Ducey signed that legislation. That went through both houses in the state of Arizona unanimously. I don't know that anything has ever gone through both houses. So they see the importance of having Mexico as a partner and the all-hands-on-deck approach that we need to take to really manage the Colorado River.
All I'm going to add is it's critical and we're going to get it done.
We as a community, we're not that involved in 3-2X, but we definitely support a successful resolution to that.
Ditto. A lazy response.
That's good, that's good, all right. Questions? Let's go back here, Sean.
Don't let Jennifer ask a question.
No, let's move on.
She asks tough questions.
Yeah, very good job, guys. And congratulations on the work you've done so far. I want to pick up, John, on how you started your conversation with how do we make
Bronco
a
Super Bowl?
sustainable river? Now, yeah, well, Bronco fan, of course. And the question I have for you is we have spent the last 10 years, and it sounds like we're going to spend the next 7 or 8 in triage. And what, in your mind, should we be looking at beyond that? I mean, what do we do to make the river a bit more sustainable?
I don't know if we're gonna have to do more. And I think that's the beauty of the DCP writing on top of the 07 guidelines, is we've now moved, if fully implemented, you move from a rigid, 19th, 20th century paradigm where everybody knows exactly how much water they get, regardless of how much water is actually there, unless there's not enough water there, and then you just start lobbing off how much water they have access to. Whereas if you look at all the way from the interim surplus guidelines in 2001 in combination with the 07 guidelines and now DCP, you're managing the system so that all the water users are getting an adjusted allocation based upon the actual amount of water that Mother Nature is providing to us. And that may be good enough for a very long time, or it may not be, right? We haven't negotiated, what happens below 1025. And that negotiation, may or may not be necessary, at least in the term of our careers. So I think sometimes incrementalism gets a bad name, but I think this DCP is what at least the people that I've sat with at the table believe is politically feasible today. It may be good enough forever, or it may be good enough for 5 years, in which case we're back at the table figuring out what additional layer we have to put onto it. But I think sometimes chasing the perfect answer and sustainability under any and all conditions leads to not actually getting anything done. And an incremental step that can be accomplished is again better than nothing.
I would just add to what John said. A lot of the focus in analyzing the DCP is looking at people that would be contributing water and storing water and building elevations in Lake Mead, and that's kind of how California looks at it, that we're incentivized. Well, we're mandated at some levels to store water and contribute. But there's other provisions that we've negotiated and worked on, and that is ability to get back stored water, the ability to pull that out in times to create flexibility, which are hugely beneficial to an agency like mine that has the ability to generate and store water, but we really need that flexibility when we get into volatile years like we've had in California recently. Driest years ever recorded history, probably in 1,500 years. We needed that ability to pull water out of our banks and pull it out quickly. DCP would do that. Our modeling and our planning would be, if we had that in place, we would not put in 200,000 acre feet at only this elevation. We'd be putting in 300,000 to 400,000 acre feet tomorrow and really helping build that much more aggressively ahead of schedule, because that's in our interest to be able to get that back. It's a huge benefit that we've put in there. We think our modeling suggests that if we implemented something like DCP in the next couple of years, we would be in good shape, barring not dramatic changes in things in hydrology, not for 10 years, but probably for about a generation, 25 years. And that is a huge step forward, not a mere incremental step, a big step.
I want to say really also as well for tribes and at least for Gila River, that's why we're accelerating our efforts to increase our groundwater storage capacity moving forward. So we can rely on our groundwater as a supplemental supply during these peak periods, these growing periods in the summer. And so by doing that, that lessens how much CAP water we use. And so that lessens and also our reliance on that as well. So by doing that, by building up a very sustainable groundwater supply, a recharge as well, that the community can potentially use less of CAP water, or within the flexibility of our water settlement, we can use this for system conservation. More of our CAP water we can potentially contribute to system conservation to help with DCP and DCP plus.
So I'll just repeat the importance of the incremental nature of moving forward. In 2013, when we started on what now became Drought Contingency Plan, the 7 states together were working on, I think we call it the outside the box planning process. And basically the principles of the states charged to the staff level people was no sacred cows. I think we have 42 items on a piece of paper somewhere sitting in a folder. Maybe some of those things are doable moving forward. Maybe some of those things become part of the negotiations of the renegotiations of the guidelines. But again, we can't put together some huge plan that would solve every theoretical problem, because if that plan can't be implemented, it's not a plan, it's an idea. We need to actually do something that creates some forward movement.
Sean, why don't you go all the way to the far most inconvenient spot of the room?
Or just make him shout. Yeah. He's a PR guy, he can shout.
No.
Lower Basin perspective on, does the DCP and 32X help or hinder the 7-state negotiation for post interim guidelines, and what are the other elements beyond DCP and 32X elements that everybody needs to begin considering for those negotiations?
So I guess I'll start by saying I think it absolutely helps. I think as we've discussed the Lower Basin Drought Contingency Plan with the Upper Basin states, one of the issues they threw on the table was a more permanent solution to the structural deficit. As you've heard here and heard from John and others, that the DCP plan really goes a long way to mitigating or solving the structural deficit issue. So yeah, I think it definitely helps, and I think maybe some of the concepts that are created in DCP, instead of them being an overlay, may morph into the next set of the guidelines.
Come out to the corner, John.
I don't get a chance.
Oh, you got a good, sorry, I didn't know you. Sorry, yeah, go for it.
I agree with Tom. I think it helps. I think, the reason we haven't gotten further ahead with the Upper Basin thus far, I think part of that's on us. Part of it's just the way Tom mentioned the outside the box process, and in 2013 into 14, we were doing that together as 7 states, and then we kind of broke apart, and the Upper Basin started working on their DCP, and we started working on ours. And I think, honestly, we caught them a little flat-footed when we shared our plan, because it was, I think, a lot more detailed than they were expecting it to be. And we have spent some time playing catch-up, trying to educate them and explain our rationales, and some of that probably could have been averted if they'd been in the room. I think the flip side of that is, my personal opinion is, DCP as it exists today wouldn't exist today if we hadn't grown. I mean, we got to a point where we had like 7 or 8 people in the room, and that's what it took to put some of those sacred cows in the Lower Basin on the table and produce what we produced. So I'm confident that as we look at the modeling and walk through the different components of the Lower Basin DCP, that the Upper Basin will get there, and we're committed to working with them to help them do that.
Maybe I could add one thing.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, from the federal perspective, I think it's not only helps, it's almost critical. And I would ask you to envision this scenario. We're in post-2020 land. We're supposed to be working on the new operational regime to start after 2026, and Lake Mead's at 10:30, and we don't have anything in place. That's not a place any of us want to be in, and we're not planning to be in.
All right, one last question.
So I guess this is primarily on the, for Mr. Lewis on the Gila River. I took your comments to be relevant mostly to the main stem, mainly incorrectly. You didn't say much about the salt. Was that sort of implicitly included in there? Because isn't the salt something like half of the flow of the Gila? Just wondered what the implications of the whole issue with is it because of the location of historical tribal lands and so on?
Right, it is. In our water settlement, it's basically, it addresses our historic rights to the Gila River. And of course, it goes all the way up into New Mexico, where it originates. We're still dealing with upstream water users that have still not come into compliance with the law, with our Arizona Water Settlement Act as well. So we're still dealing with those diversions as well moving forward, which is taking away from our water rights that we won back, that we fought hard for. That's still a concern. So it's basically Gila River water. A portion of our community broke away, and this was maybe over 100 years ago, almost 200 years ago, and they settled. And this was during the time when the Gila River water was pretty much completely dammed, and so they went more north towards the Salt River. So we have basically two tribes of the Ocumel. We have the Ocumel, which is the Salt River Pima Maricopa tribe. They're located next to Scottsdale in more northern part. They're about maybe a 10,000 member tribe. They're closely related. We speak the same Nyack language, O'odham language, but their water rights are more tied to the Salt River, their Salt River historic ties.
I'll just say, if you look at the water budget for that settlement, the 650,000, Governor Lewis showed that 311 was Colorado River. The rest is Gila, Salt, and Verde. So there is a specific piece of their water budget that is from the Salt River, water that came out of the Salt River project, water users as part of the negotiations.
I think I'm going to cut off the conversation there, in part because we have a lunch. Our lunch is a buffet today, and those tend to take a little longer than box lunches, so I want to make sure everyone has time for that. So I have one other announcement after that, but first let's thank our panel, fabulous panel. Fabulous panel. Okay, so lunch will be upstairs, and we will reconvene at 1 o'clock. You'll also probably notice as the afternoon goes on that they are setting up for a large party, a large reception just outside that starts at 5 o'clock, and it's not a party for us. It's a party to commemorate the 125th anniversary of the law school. The good news is, though, we have official permission to crash the party, so take full advantage. There will be food, there will be drink, and it'll be of no cost to us. And we will take all the parking spots that everyone else needs, and I'll probably get in trouble for that. But
if someone's missing their room key to the Best Western, come see me.
We'll put that in the fishbowl. Not that sort of.